Hey everybody, thanks again for joining us for another edition of Advancement Live. My name is Ryan Catherwood and I am coming to you live from the grounds of the University of Virginia here in Charlottesville, Virginia. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time, thank you so much. Advancement Live airs twice a month on the second and last Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Advancement Live is part of the HigherEdLive network, which is a series of professional development web shows. Also podcasts, which you may be familiar with already, but if you have not listened to the podcast, you can download the app from iTunes or go to higheredlive.com and do the same. Be part of our broadcast, of course, by tuning in live to the back channel. If you use the hashtag HigherEdLive during the course of the broadcast, we will be monitoring that, and you can ask questions to our panelists today. And finally, be sure to subscribe to the HigherEdLive newsletter by going to the higheredlive.com website. Let me begin the show by introducing our excellent sponsors. iModules is one of our fantastic sponsors, and they have their annual user conference called Sizzler, which is a 3-day event for networking, sharing, and learning industry best practices, and you can join over 500 higher education professionals representing more than 225 organizations. That conference is coming up the end of July, July 27th through the 30th in Overland Park. And also, a sponsor of Advancement Live are our good friends at M. Stoner. The show is produced by M. Stoner, in fact, which is a marketing and communications firm that works with educational institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. My third guest this afternoon, Ashley Weeks-Cart of Williams College. Ashley Weeks-Cart graduated from Williams in 2005 with her BA in Art and Gender Studies. She holds a master's degree from the University of Southern California in Public Art Studies. She worked for Goucher College in campus life and for the city of Ventura out in California as an event planner before working at Williams in 2010 as the Associate Director of Alumni Relations and the Director of Classes and Reunions. Kind of far apart, Ashley, University of Southern California and Ventura, California, from your beautiful spot up in New England.
Yes. I needed some time on the West Coast before I could come home to Massachusetts, but we're glad to be back.
Great. And in our pre-show call, we talked a little bit of the fact that one of the distinguishing factors about Williams College, and something that Lisa alluded to, was that that reunions are almost made much more successful when they're driven by volunteers, and that is a very important factor at Williams College. What does that mean specifically for you guys? What's a volunteer-driven reunion?
So we run a quinquennial reunion program, so that's every 5 years you come back to celebrate reunion, and typically that ranges from the 5th to the 70th reunion. We actually have separate offices that staff the 25th and 50th reunions, so I don't have to worry about them. There's teams that do that work, so I'm worrying about the 5th through 70th reunions, excluding the 25th and 50th. And the reason I'm able to work with that volume of classes is largely because they are planned and executed by volunteers that I'm working closely with, but that are doing the majority of the planning for their class. So these are people that have either been class officers or the class officers have helped identify as somebody who would, thrive in an event planning capacity, because my volunteers are not only communicating to their class, helping come up with class-specific schedules. They're on the phone with caterers, they're figuring out meals, they're working with budgets, they're ordering class gifts. They're doing all of the heavy lifting for their class, and I serve is the support in that, obviously, and somebody who can provide feedback and guidance. But really it is their work that makes it possible to have essentially 14 reunions happening simultaneously on campus.
And I think that's an amazing feat, right? To have all of those reunions that are largely planned by volunteer alums. But of course, there's some challenges associated with taking that approach, and one of them is perhaps a challenge of training. And I think what you mentioned, that you actually have a volunteer training weekend. Could you talk a little bit about that weekend and some of the components?
Yes, so in September, we gather together the 5th through the 45th reunion. So my post 50th classes I work with in a different capacity, so I'll leave that to the side for now. But I gather together, again, I reach out to over the summer and actually I send a save a date to those classes, again, the 5th through 45th reunion classes, early in the new year, letting them know the date for this planning weekend, and reach out again to the class officers to let them know that I'd love for them to attend, and if there are people in the class that they know either want to help support the reunion planning efforts for their class, or that the officers think they should encourage to support it, to reach out to them and let them know the date. So it's a Saturday in September that I bring them to campus, and we do kind of a big training session in the morning with me going over the overview for the program and how our reunion program works, the pieces that they'll be responsible for as reunion chairs for their class, the things that I'm responsible for, and how we work together. Everything from communication strategies to determining class gifts to where their headquarters will be on campus, because we headquarter each class depending on which reunion year they're in various parts of campus. And then we have breakout sessions where the classes, break out on their own and can actually begin the planning process. I circulate with my assistant, and we kind of talk them through what they're thinking about. And I can also speak to some of the class-specific, or I should say reunion cycle specific realities, because I think there's definitely a culture to say the 5th reunion versus the 35th reunion or the 15th reunion. So I get an opportunity to speak to what the culture is for a 5th reunion versus, speaking to that for the 45th reunion, and how those things differ and what they should be focused on or thinking about. And so it's a good opportunity also just for them to have some face-to-face contact with me. It makes our planning process much smoother than for the rest of the year. I'm a known entity. They know they can pick up the phone and call me or shoot me an email. And then they're, well equipped kind of moving forward with the process. I obviously am checking in with them throughout, but at least that's a good first touch point to kind of kick the planning into high gear.
And one of the things that I was perusing your website and noticed that tremendous parade of classes that you guys have, like Jenna mentioned, that's a big tradition that you guys have to kick off perhaps the weekend itself. And you've been at Williams for 5 years now, and you're a graduate, so you've had a chance to watch all of those classes take on the parade. And you mentioned in the last response that you have sort of a sense as to what makes a successful reunion for the various years, and present those models for the volunteers to go by. Mm-hmm. So could you talk a little bit about what makes a 15-year reunion perhaps different than a 30-year reunion or a 5th-year reunion? What makes one more successful than the other?
Yeah, I think it's just the stages of life that people are in at these various milestones. So your 5th-year reunion, we're getting over 50% of the class to come back. It is usually mostly singles or recently married or engaged folks coming back, not many children, a lot of them looking to kind of relive their college experience. And so they want to have late night parties, they want to have late night dances, they don't care about babysitters and child activities. So that's one very specific set of interests and needs, versus the 15th year reunion is our lowest attended reunion. And if you think at where people are at in their lives, kind of in their mid-30s, at the peak of career, at an age where their kids are, for the most part, kind of in their elementary school years, and travel can be difficult and expensive to move that many bodies. We get the lowest attendance rate for that reunion, I think, because logistically it is complicated from both a personal life and a work life perspective. And also they care very much at that stage, even though obviously not everybody has children or has families, enough of them do that it is very important to be thinking about kids' activities and gifts for kids when they're checking in, and babysitting and family accommodations and things like that. So those are things that group of volunteers are having to think about that the fifth year isn't. And then you move on to, say, the 40th or the 45th, and more people are empty nesters at that stage. Many are moving towards retirement or have more flexibility in their work because they're well established in their careers, and so they're coming up earlier. They want to do class dinners on not just Friday and Saturday, but Thursday night too. So again, it's thinking about, and it's really reflective of, again, in general, obviously these are huge generalizations and there's wide variety in terms of what people are doing, but you can really feel, just in terms of the consistency of attendance numbers that we get based on what cycle a class is in, there's a real culture to each of the reunion cycles. So I try to help classes think about what those are and the kinds of things they should be thinking about so that it can be successful, depending, again, which reunion cycle they're in.
I think I would have to imagine one of the things that impacts success is sort of managing expectations, right, when it comes to the volunteers and what they can anticipate. And I know that you guys take a look at previous year reunion data in order to help in the planning process. Could you explain a little bit about how you do that?
So we keep reunion attendance charts that break out for the past 10 years of, say, a 5th reunion or a 10th reunion, when, the rate with which people registered. So we break them out 10 weeks from reunion, 8 weeks from reunion, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, and then 3, 2, 1. And we show how many people are in your class versus other classes, say, in the 5th reunion cycle, the previous 10 years. And then we show how many people had registered at those different stages and what percentage that means of the class was registered at that point. And it helps them kind of predict how many people to expect, because they can look at those numbers in September and say, okay, so the past 3 5th reunions have had about 50 to 54% attendance. Our class size is this, so around 50% of our class is X, so we can expect this many people. But it also gives them a good sense of, once we're in the registration process, how their class is tracking, whether they are getting numbers that are higher than past years, and so they might need to plan for more people than perhaps expected, or if they're lagging behind and need to perhaps bump up communication efforts or think about outreach a little differently or more targeted ways. And so those are really good predictors, not just for the volunteers, but for our office, because we house people on campus and there are certain realities just in terms of capacity of a campus meant for 2,000 people that is getting 3,000 plus bodies back to campus, any reunion. So these kind of help everybody in the planning process, so we know how many people to expect.
Yeah, and I think that, I would imagine it to be a crucial component in the planning process, and the execution is to use that data to inform your communication plan. So that's great. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that one of the other components that we had fun talking about in our pre-show call is how student workers are a huge part of your reunion program. And can you talk a few minutes about in what ways students are deployed to make reunions at Williams a successful event?
Mm-hmm. So we have a reunion ranger program. So we call our student workers reunion rangers, and we hire now 50 plus students to work with our office during the weekend. And I actually hire somebody who manages them because there are so many of them, and we have to worry about housing them and feeding them and also managing their schedules. And they do everything from man our registration and register people, do face painting for kids, handing out class gifts, answering questions, to shuttling alumni around campus, to wearing the purple cow costume, which is our mascot, and wandering around campus. They help in any number of capacities. And part of the reason, so when I started this work in 2010, we actually usually only hired around 30 to 35. Some of that was because it's expensive. They wind up working more than 40 hours in that 4 days that they're working for us, so we're paying them overtime. And again, we're having to house them on campus and feed them for their extra time on campus. But what I have found is that alumni, when I get feedback, they speak very highly of the time that they get to spend with those rangers, whether it's, sitting in a shuttle or getting help from the rangers help unlock people if they lock themselves out of their rooms. But those conversations with students are some of the most meaningful and impactful moments that they have, because they get to see what the Williams of today is like through these student workers. And Williams has changed dramatically, especially for some of our classes, our post 50th classes, from what it once was. And so it's a really good chance for them to get a taste of what the student body is like now. And all the reunion rangers wear these really obnoxious bright orange shirts, so it's very apparent who the rangers are, who the workers are, and they're usually very outgoing, extroverted, friendly, kind people. And so we tell them to go to really talk to alums and engage them honestly about their experience at Williams if they're asked about it. And we found that that's some of the best way to spend our money, because it gives alums really a good sense of what the Williams of today is about. And they do so much of our grunt work for us as well that it would not be possible to run Reunion without them.
Important to have a little grunt work. And speaking of grunt work, I have a little boy myself. He's 2.5 years old, and I would imagine taking him to a reunion weekend along with my wife would be a exciting and challenging endeavor. And I know you guys have a pretty robust kids program. I think that probably most reunion programs attempt to have a kids program of some sort. Can you talk a little bit about what yours are, some of the elements of it?
Yep. So the main one is we call it our family activities program because it is really intended for families. It is not a babysitting service, this particular schedule. It is starting from an hour before the parade through the evening. We have a series of programs and activities on campus that are really geared towards families. Everything from planetarium shows in the evening with Professor from our astronomy department to doing purple crafts and getting their face painted and creating props for the parade, that morning, to soccer clinics with some of our reunion rangers who are on the soccer team. We've done bonfires. We have kids concerts. We have stuff at our museums, kids programs geared at our college museum, where they're doing a very family-centered and kid-specific kind of activity. So we have opportunities essentially all throughout Saturday, so that families, because we have a whole program running throughout the weekend and particularly on Saturday afternoon, but we want to make sure that many of those options are available again to alums coming back to campus with kids. And then we also, for the first time this year, launched something called the Purple Cow Camp, and it was in conjunction with the local community preschool that had the facilities. Is a wonderful resource for families in Williamstown, and so it's a way of supporting them and directing some resources to them, but also them supplying us with some help, where they offered group babysitting and childcare from 6 p.m. till midnight during reunion in their facilities. And the older kids they took around campus, but they had the cots and they have all the insurance and stuff like that. So that was really successful, and I think alumni really appreciated having an affordable and relatively easy, it's right next to campus, opportunity for group babysitting for their kids. And so I think next year we'll offer that both Friday and Saturday evening as a babysitting option, because of course, people can bring babysitters to campus, but that can get expensive. We do offer the babysitters free housing, but still just traveling with a sitter can be expensive. And again, finding local sitters can be complicated for that many people. So I think having this group babysitting option was really, really successful, in conjunction with having a very family-friendly reunion or campus-wide reunion program as well.
Fantastic. Great bits of advice in there, Ashley, and thank you so much for joining us. I would like to mention that iModules conference coming up, the 8th user conference, the Sizzler, is